Tonight, the Prime Minister announces plans to recognise a Palestinian state. Sir Keir Starmer says it will happen in September at the United Nations, but this caveat is key.
Unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza.
The shift followed talks with his cabinet and President Trump. But leaving the UK today, Donald Trump said they never discuss recognising Palestine. And Israel has described it as a gift to Hamas. We'll hear from the country's UN ambassador, Danny Dannell. Also ahead, the deadly shooting by a gunman who targeted American football, claiming that playing the sport left him with a brain disease. Is Sudan facing the same fate as Libya, split between rival warring governments? And later, a day of celebration for the Lionesses. Euros champions lift their trophy in front of Buckingham Palace after a parade through London. All that and more coming up in The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Hello and welcome to the programme. It's a move that the Prime Minister believes will help end suffering, captured day after day among images like these in Gaza. On a day that the Palestinian death toll in the war was said to pass 60,000 and warnings that famine is stalking ever closer, Sir Keir Starmer announced that the UK would recognise a Palestinian state. He says he'll go ahead with it in September if, by then, Israel hasn't agreed to a ceasefire and other conditions. As far as symbolism goes, it's strong, but still it's symbolic and appears to be a gesture by a leader under pressure from within and outside his party over the weapons Britain sells to Israel to continue the war. Here's some of what the Prime Minister announced today.
Our goal remains a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. But right now, that goal is under pressure like never before. I've always said that we will recognise a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution. And this includes allowing the UN to restart the supply of aid and making clear that there will be no annexations in the West Bank. Meanwhile, our message to the terrorists of Hamas is unchanged and unequivocal. They must immediately release all of the hostages, sign up to a ceasefire, disarm, and accept that they will play no part in the government of Gaza. And we'll make an assessment in September on how far the parties have met these steps, but no one should have a veto over our decision.
The Prime Minister speaking a little earlier. Well, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, dialed into that cabinet call. He then made a statement at the United Nations in New York, talking about the burden of history weighing on Britain. Have a listen.
It is with the hand of history on our shoulders that His Majesty's government therefore intends to recognise the State of Palestine when the UN General Assembly gathers in September here in New York. Friends, we will do this unless the Israeli government acts to end the appalling situation in Gaza, ends its military campaign, and commits to a long, sustainable peace based on a two-state solution. Our demands on Hamas also remain absolute and unwavering.
David Lammy, well, while President Trump, leaving the UK after a visit to Scotland, said he and Mr Starmer didn't discuss what he later announced. Have a listen.
We'll let you know where we are, but I am not in that camp.
Mr. President,
because if you do that, you really are rewarding Hamas, and I'm not about to do that.
That was Donald Trump. Well, tonight we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who tweeted this not long ago. Have a look on your screen. Starmer rewards Hamas's monstrous terrorism and punishes its victims. A jihadist state on Israel's border today will threaten Britain tomorrow. Appeasement towards jihadist terrorists always fails. It will fail you too. It will not happen. Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who joins me now. We will go into why the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, chose to do this in this moment. But we have heard that reaction there from Benjamin Netanyahu in the last half an hour or so.
Very hostile, I suppose predictable. But it's interesting because number 10 was saying when the Prime Minister made his statement in Downing Street this afternoon that Sir Keir had spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of that statement. The readout of that phone call now says that the Prime Minister said the Cabinet would consider what steps on the recognition of Palestine. So quite a vague statement. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because President Trump, speaking on Air Force One, said, no, he didn't discuss that with me. And now Netanyahu is saying, well, he never really told me exactly what he was going to do. So the Prime Minister, as you can imagine, he's got, you saw the reception there that David Lammy got in New York. And clearly all those countries that have long been in calling for this are delighted by what he said. The President of France, of course, Macron, when he was over on a state visit, and then when the Prime Minister spoke to him and Chancellor Merz of Germany, Macron, of course, has said, yes, he wants to do this, and he'll announce it at the UN General Assembly in September. Well, the Prime Minister was saying today, depending on those conditions we've just heard about, you're going to do it before then. So clearly this is, as you might expect, divided opinion. Those who've always been calling for this are delighted, but the Americans are pretty hostile. There are reports that the State Department is also saying it's a reward for Hamas, as the Israelis are. And that reaction from President Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, is very strong.
John, just talk us through why the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, felt he needed to do this in this moment.
Why now? Yeah, at the weekend, number 10 was saying it's a matter of when, not if. But up to the weekend, really, the Prime Minister had been resisting calls from his MPs and his cabinet to do this now. Now, on Friday, there were more than 250 MPs, or 220 at the time, now 250, backing a call in a letter from the MP who chairs the International Development Committee, that's Sarah Champion, Labour MP, for the government to do this at that conference where Mr Lammy's been speaking today. Now, tonight, Sarah Champion, the MP who orchestrated that letter, she's delighted, although she's worried about the conditions. Others, the domestic political reaction, both the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, and Jeremy Corbyn, perhaps the most pro-Palestine MP in Parliament, is worried about, he's calling it a bargaining chip, and worried about the conditions and so on. The Tories, of course, are saying, Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, says, oh, this is appeasing Labour MPs. Kemi Badenoch says it's political posturing. So it's not got a great reception from the government's political opponents here. Hostile reaction abroad. The MPs who have been campaigning for this seem pleased, although there are concerns about those conditions. I mean, just to run through them very quickly. One is end the situation in Gaza, ceasefire number 2, no annexation of the West Bank number 3, long-term peace process that delivers a two-state solution number 4. Well, the reaction from President Netanyahu suggests that the Israelis are in no mood to make concessions here. And what is interesting from what we've heard from President Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu, it looks as though the PM did not spell out exactly what he was going to do, kept it up his sleeve, perhaps until he spoke to his cabinet. We're told 7 cabinet ministers at least were calling for this. So pressure from backbenchers, pressure from the cabinet, pressure from President Macron. And of course, to be fair to the Prime Minister, the urgent need to do something about the dreadful humanitarian crisis, which the Prime Minister's talked about. And President Trump, of course, talking about the TV pictures, said you can't fake that yesterday in Scotland. And he also talked about getting every ounce of food into... a very noble motive there, but perhaps a more cynical political party management motive as well from the PM.
John, as always, thank you so much. Well, I spoke this evening to Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon. I began by asking him about the UK's plan to recognise a Palestinian state. Just have a listen.
Israel agreed for a ceasefire many times. We said yes, Hamas said no. And if you don't believe us, you should ask the negotiators, the US, Egypt and Qatar. And they will tell everyone that Israel is not the problem. Israel is not the obstacle for a ceasefire. So hopefully there will be a ceasefire before September. You know, we don't interfere on decisions of other countries. But with all the respect, all those declarations and empty speeches and conferences that we are seeing in the UN, they will not bring any progress to the region. We have to move forward. We have to bring back the hostages and get rid of Hamas. That is the only hope, not only for us, but also for the Palestinians.
Whether this is symbolic or not, a symbolic gesture, Ambassador Danon, we are now talking about Israel's closest allies, countries like France, now Britain, countries that you want to court like Saudi Arabia, also at this conference. That means that Israel has, for the last 22 months, because of its actions in Gaza, has in some ways had some of its closest allies turn to Israel and say, what you are doing is wrong.
We are on the same side. I would expect the UK and France to support our fight against Hamas and to put pressure on Hamas to accept the ceasefire. But what they are doing now, they are actually pushing Hamas to the other side, because some people in Hamas might think that now is not the time to move forward for a ceasefire, because look what's happening in Europe.
Well, many would say, look what's happening in Gaza, including many Israeli officials and prominent Israeli voices. And I'm just going to quote those to you. Ehud Olmert, Israel's former prime minister, just yesterday said, I've said it before and I haven't changed my mind, that there are things which are intolerable and unforgivable, which we are responsible for what happens in Gaza. Last month, he said, Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza, and that never since its establishment has the state of Israel waged such a war. Yesterday, 2 leading Israeli human rights groups, B'Tselem and the Physicians for Human Rights Israel, accused Israel of genocide in Gaza. They described a deliberate and systematic extermination of the health system in Gaza. Israeli-born genocide scholar Omer Bartov said today the IDF is primarily engaged in an operation of demolition and ethnic cleansing. These are not your allies. These are not other states. These are not people trying to, in your words, whether they're trying to encourage or appease Hamas. These are Israelis. This is an Israeli former prime minister. This is 2 leading human rights groups in Israel.
So all those sources that you mentioned are radical forces, and we are a democracy. We allow free speech to everyone, even if you spread lies. And Prime Minister Olmert is lying. He doesn't have a clue of what's happening today. And those organizations you mentioned, for years, they act against Israel, no matter what's happening on the ground. And we know that there is no genocide in Gaza. There are no war crimes. On the contrary, for us, the suffering in Gaza, it's a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy.
Well, the images speak for themselves, Ambassador Danon, and it's something that President Donald Trump has also spoken to. He has said, you cannot fake the images that we're seeing. He says and has acknowledged that what he is seeing is starvation in Gaza. And I'm also going to quote Anthony Aguilar, a retired U.S. Special Forces officer who worked for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a body that Israel put in place because you said you couldn't trust the way in which aid was being distributed by the UN. He resigned because he said he witnessed war crimes and saw the IDF shooting at crowds of Palestinians.
So first of all, we should agree that the Humanitarian Foundation is doing an important work. And you can see from the results that in the area that you have those centers, you don't have any reports for starvation claims or other reports. And I wish we had more centers. And I hope there will be more centers.
Ambassador, it's being described by many as death traps. The surgeons that I've been speaking to say that those who return from that area have all sorts of gunshot wounds to their chest, to their testicles, children as young as 11, 12 and 13 years old. I mean, you can deny this, but this is someone who worked for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation saying he saw the IDF shoot at Palestinian civilians there. Over 1,000 people are believed to have died trying to get aid from those centers.
You know, you cannot deny the fact that the foundation actually distributed millions of meals.
I'm going to quote
allow me to move forward with all due respect. We want to ease the suffering in Gaza. You know, today, 300 trucks entered Gaza. As we speak,
you know that's nearly not enough. You know that there are 6,000 trucks waiting at the border, and there are many saying that the food in those trucks have expired because you've just left them on the border. And when we talk about meals, Israel claims that somewhere upward of 87,000 meals have been distributed over 3 months. 90 million meals have been distributed over the course of the last 3 months. I'm just going to quote some of those numbers to you. On Monday, the 28th, which is just yesterday, 1.2 million meals were distributed in one day. There are 2 million people living in the enclave. So we're talking about half a meal to each person. And there is uncertainty about who these meals are being distributed to and whether the most needy are getting these meals, because there is no measure in place. There are no large organizations trying to distribute these meals. You're just relying on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is being
Yalda,
accused of
with all due respect, please allow me to answer your claims. You keep reading and misleading the audience. The facts are that as we speak, you have more than 600 trucks that crossed the border, waiting in Gaza for distribution. And the UN is not distributing the aid. And instead of blaming Israel for everything, I would advise the UN to stop distributing lies and start to distribute the aid.
So are you saying that President Trump is lying when he says that the pictures speak for themselves, you can't fake this, there is starvation in Gaza?
Well, I think there is no starvation in Gaza. If there were incidents, we regret them, and the blame is on Hamas. But when you look at the number of aid that entered Gaza in the last few months, you understand that there is no problem of aid.
I've just quoted those numbers. It isn't even half a meal for a single person, and there is no clarity about whether that is going to the right people.
No, you know what you quoted. Excuse me, I have to correct you. You quoted the number from the GHF, from the foundation.
Correct.
But when you add to that the trucks that entered Gaza, and the truck that entered Gaza during the ceasefire.
No, and you know, sir, that the number of trucks entering Gaza is not sufficient, and they haven't. There's been a blockade. The hunger and starvation we have seen has also been. We're seeing for the first time the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. The IPC has said famine is underway in Gaza. That's based on a report that they have put out today, where they're saying famine is underway. So you can say that you don't believe that starvation is taking place in Gaza.
The only starvation in Gaza...
Famine is now underway in Gaza.
No, the only starvation in Gaza is the starvation campaign that Hamas is behind it and the UN is behind it. And I have to admit, it was a very successful campaign. You know, they tried a few months ago to run a campaign about the hospitals, which we proved that it was a lie. And today they're running the campaign about the starvation.
You're not allowing journalists into the Gaza Strip. So we are having to rely on people, for example, from the World Food Programme. And Cindy McCain, the executive director of the World Food Programme, has said, we need to flood Gaza with large-scale food aid immediately and without obstruction and keep it flowing each and every day to prevent mass starvation. Ross Smith, the WFP emergency director, says this is unlike anything we have seen in this century. It reminds us of previous disasters in Ethiopia in the past century. We need urgent action now. Tom Fletcher, the UN humanitarian chief, says what has been delivered so far has just been a drop in the ocean of what is required. It's the beginning, but the next few days are really make or break. And Volker Turk, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, yesterday told me the situation in Gaza is dystopian. You can reject all of these people, Ambassador, and point the finger of blame at Hamas or the UN. But, you know, President Trump is saying it. Cindy McCain...
Yeah, so Yalda, you know, you will allow me to answer. You're reading all these quotes, and I don't want to tell you what I think about Mr. Tom Fletcher. We have already proved that he is a liar, and he blamed us for killing 14,000 babies, and a week later, in an interview, he said it was a mistake. So we're dealing with professional liars. But let me ask you one question, a very simple one. With all due respect to all the prestigious individuals you mentioned, why they are not collaborating with the GHF? If they say that there is a starvation and famine and a crisis in Gaza, why don't they collaborate with a fund that brings food into Gaza? They can improve the work of the foundation, they can work with them, but from the beginning, they are fighting the foundation because they want to control the narrative. They want to control the narrative, and they want to have full control of the humanitarian efforts in Gaza.
This is not an impartial body that was created. You know, those who have been part of it, were trying to run it, have stepped aside because they say that it doesn't meet the requirements of international law, humanitarian law. Over 1,000 people have been killed, shot at, trying to get...
No, that's a lie, and there is no real answer. And there is no real answer why people who are supposed to care about humanitarian efforts in Gaza actually deny the work of a fund that comes in and delivers food for free for the people of Gaza.
That was Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. Well, Dr. Sarah Hosseini is director of the British Palestinian Committee. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us here on the programme. We're just listening there to Danny Danon responding to a number of issues, including whether famine and starvation exists in Gaza. But I'm going to initially ask you about what the British Prime Minister has done today, announcing the potential recognition of a Palestinian state. Just your response to that.
Yes, thank you, Yalda. I think let's remind ourselves, first of all, and you've been speaking a bit about this to the Israeli ambassador, of the context in which this announcement comes. So we're talking about 21 months here of relentless assault on Gaza, which has involved the decimation of a population, the destruction of every facet of civil and social life. We've seen across the media horrific images of emaciated bodies the last few weeks as Israel has forcibly starved Palestinians in Gaza and then lured them out and exterminated them when they've tried to reach aid stations for food. Now, throughout this time, the UK government has not only failed to live up to its legal obligations to uphold the rights of the Palestinian people, it's provided active diplomatic, economic and military support to a country that is in this dock, a state that is in the dock for genocide, and whose leaders have been indicted by the International Criminal Court. So instead of focusing on condemnatory statements and symbolic recognition, the Prime Minister should rather recognise the genocide and take immediate active measures to end it, as well as Britain's own participation in it, by severing diplomatic ties, instituting a full arms embargo, ending all forms of military collaboration and applying comprehensive economic sanctions.
So Dr. Hosseini, you believe that this is just a symbolic gesture, that they could have done a series of other things which would have put pressure on this Israeli government to change tact in Gaza rather than going straight to, recognition of a Palestinian state?
Yeah, the absolute priority now is to end the genocide and ensure accountability. And recognition in this context, in the context I just outlined, will not end the genocide. I think our message to the Prime Minister, we wrote a letter to the Prime Minister ahead of this cabinet meeting, and the message was that these sorts of cosmetic and symbolic steps won't end the genocide, which is urgently the most immediate priority, won't relieve the government of its duties, and won't silence also the calls of the British public to end British complicity in the atrocities that everyone has seen live streamed to their phones for the past 21 plus months.
Why do you think the Prime Minister chose to do this in this moment?
My sense is that it's an attempt to diffuse pressure. There's been a lot of pressure building on the government from the British public and from elsewhere, given the horrors that we're seeing perpetrated in Gaza, given the building and amounting evidence of genocide against the Israeli government. This is not just from, the indicative provisional measures of the International Court of Justice, which took place way back in January of 2024, but has since been from genocide scholars, from international leading human rights organizations. I think you mentioned just yesterday, but B'Tselem, Israel's own major leading human rights organization, also added their voice to this incident. So the UK government is under pressure to do something, and it's a shame that it hasn't done the things it needs to do, and it should be doing as it's legally obligated under various bodies of international law.
Yeah, what is your expectation and the obligation of the international community, countries like Britain, France, the United States in this moment?
What we expect them to abide by international law. They have duties, all of these states who are signed on to the Genocide Convention, to prevent and punish genocide, but also to end all complicity in it. And this includes the sorts of concrete steps I've outlined before, which is things like ending military collaboration. It's things like urgently reviewing public contracts to make sure they're not aiding genocidal acts, or as per the ICJ advisory opinion that was given last July on the prolonged nature of Israel's unlawful occupation, they are bound not to aid or abet Israel's occupation in any way. So there's some very concrete steps, including the ending and cutting of ties, comprehensive sanctions. All of these things are incredibly important in order to be able to actually take some measures to stop this finally.
Dr. Sarah Husseini, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme. Has a sports-related motive emerged in the deadly shooting in a New York skyscraper?
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Leicester is on its knees. It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
The founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets. Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. A gunman who went on a shooting rampage in New York appears to have been targeting America's National Football League. Investigators say Shane Tamura, who killed 4 people before taking his own life, had a note blaming the sport for a degenerative brain condition he claimed to suffer. Our US correspondent David Blevins reports.
Active shooting in the Midtown North at Park Avenue.
Disbelief in downtown Manhattan. The evening routine upended by an active shooting.
Please shelter in place. Stay away from your windows.
Occupants of a skyscraper taking cover in their offices.
Male is wearing a black suit and a bulletproof vest.
Armed with an assault rifle, Shane Tamura had casually strolled into the building. He was 27 years old and had a history of mental illness.
The building's security camera footage shows the shooter enter the lobby, turn right, and immediately open fire on an NYPD officer. He then shoots a woman who took cover behind a pillar and proceeds through the lobby, spraying it with gunfire.
In other offices, they barricaded the door with furniture until the lockdown was eventually lifted. In a note, the gunman, who died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, referenced CTE, a brain injury linked to contact sports. And the NFL, America's National Football League, its New York offices, seemingly his intended target. An NFL employee was amongst the injured.
He appeared to have blamed the NFL for his injury. From our preliminary investigation, he took the wrong elevator bank up to the NFL headquarters. Instead, it took him to Rudin Management, and that is where he carried out additional shootings.
Diderul Islam had been a police officer for 3 years. NYPD honouring their fallen colleague as his body was transferred. Aged 36, he was married with 2 children, his wife pregnant with their 3rd child.
He was always there for everyone, and he always showed up. Every time anyone needed any help, he was always there. And yeah, we lost him, and he didn't deserve to die that early.
Wesley Lepatner worked for Blackstone Investment. They described her as brilliant, passionate, warm, generous and respected. There are fresh questions about access to assault rifles or to any firearms for those with a mental health history. But this is a nation still paralysed on gun reform. A nation in mourning, again. David Blevins, Sky News.
Let's go straight to our US correspondent Martha Kellner, who's reported extensively on CTE. And Martha, as I said, you've reported extensively over the years on this condition, which really does in many ways remain a mysterious illness. Just tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when something like this happens, Yalda, something so horrific, people naturally grasp for answers. Why would someone do something so awful? Well, in this case, the gunman, Shane Tamura, left a 3-page handwritten note behind in his car in which he repeatedly references this disease, CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It is a brain disease which can cause paranoia, rage, serious personality changes. He writes in this note, CTE, study my brain, please. And that's because CTE has been linked to head injuries sustained in contact sports. Tamura also references specifically Terry Long, who was an NFL star some years ago. In fact, he took his life 20 years ago by drinking antifreeze. He was later diagnosed with severe CTE. It is a disease which can only be diagnosed after death. In this note, Tamura writes, the league knowingly concealed the dangers to our brains to maximise profits. They failed as well. Shane Tamura never actually played in the NFL, but he was a very successful high school football player. I've investigated, as you mentioned, Yalda, CTE extensively. I spoke to the mother of a 25-year-old, Noah Green, who also committed an act of shocking violence. He stabbed a police officer to death outside the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. in 2021. His mother, convinced that injuries he sustained on the football field as a teenager changed his personality, that he developed paranoia. She sent his brain for analysis after that attack, and it turned out he did in fact have CTE. There are numerous other high-profile cases as well. Philip Adams, who played for the San Francisco 49ers, he killed 6 people, shot them to death in Rock Hill, South Carolina, several years ago, including 2 small children and their grandparents. So it is something, I think, given what has happened yesterday in New York, there will be intensified calls for more examination of the links between football, CTE and violent crime. The NFL, though, we contacted them for comment. One of their colleagues, they say, was injured in this incident. They called it an unspeakable act of violence. They have in the past referenced changes that they've made to player safety to address CTE.
Martha, thank you so much for bringing us up to date and for all of your reporting. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we'll look at the war in Sudan and the emergence of rival governments splitting the country.
gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back to the programme. After more than 2 years of war, Sudan is being pulled towards more chaos and fragmentation. What began as a power struggle in 2023 spiralled into all-out conflict between the army and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Since then, tens of thousands of people have been killed, 13 million uprooted, and some areas gripped by famine. Well, now the RSF paramilitary and its allies have declared their own government in areas they control, shaded here in yellow. Their territory includes the western region of Darfur, where allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity are being investigated. There have also been accusations of atrocities against the army, which controls the areas shaded green, including the capital, Khartoum. Well, let's bring in Dr. Aladdin Nogoud, a Sudanese liver and organ transplant surgeon and pro-democracy activist. Thank you so much, Dr. Nogoud, for joining us here on the programme. Just tell us a little bit more about this TASIS organisation, this partnership between the Rapid Support Forces and Sudan's People Liberation Movement North. Some are saying this is some kind of desperate attempt to rebrand the RSF.
Okay, thank you, Yalda, for having me on your show. No, it's not actually a rebranding of the RSF. The TASIS alliance, the formation of the TASIS alliance was a mandatory because after, as you said in your report, 2 years of the war and the trials, the different trials and the different peace platforms to end the war, and there's only one part who is spoiling the peace platforms. That is the SAF. And why it spoils the peace platforms? Because the political agenda of the SAF is to bring back the Muslim Brotherhood, NCP, or the outside al-Bashir regime back to power.
And Sir Dr. Nogoud, both the SAF and the RSF have been accused of all sorts of gross rights abuses. The US imposed sanctions on Hemedti, accusing the leader of the RSF of committing serious human rights abuses under his leadership. So this alliance is with the RSF and as we said, the SPLM North. But what is the point of it in this moment, other than trying to seek some kind of legitimacy after 2 years of brutality?
No, actually, it's not seeking legitimacy after 2 years of brutality. It's actually a standing against who is spoiling the peace platforms and who's want to continue the war instead of just remaining silent against it. The TASIS alliance is a political tool that it will work against what the SAF and the Muslim Brotherhood is using as a fake legitimacy. They have no legitimacy after.
The group that you are a part of also includes the RSF, which has been not just accused of gross human rights violations, but this group is now being accused of splitting and fracturing the country further.
The violations, the violations is committed by both of them, as in the reports. But the issue is that the whole UN agencies and the whole agencies that's reporting the atrocities, they didn't even came to the RSF-controlled areas. They didn't even came to Sudan to see what's the atrocities, who's contemplating the atrocities.
Is it safe to come to the RSF-controlled?
The NGOs. Yesterday, only the UN expert on human rights, he showed an intent to come to the RSF areas to report and to see what's about the human rights. And we welcome that today in our press statements. This is the first time, even the fact-finding mission reports that was issued in 2024, none of the experts were in Sudan. None of them came to the RSF areas. Although the RSF...
Are you currently, part of the peace process in any way? Is this group, this TASIS group, part of the peace process right now?
Until now, there is no peace process going right now because all the previous peace platforms were spoiled.
Players are currently talking.
there is no right now peace platforms, because all of the previous peace platforms in Jeddah, first round, second round, in Al-Manama, Geneva, first round, second round, were spoiled by the SAF or by the RSF. And this is the true narrative of the war. You said in the beginning of your talk that it's power struggle. It's not a power struggle. The SAF erupted this war to bring back the ousted al-Bashir regime, which was ousted by the people,
and we've
uprising.
also, I mean, and it's very clear what the SAF has done, but also the group that you are a part of, the Rapid Support Forces, they too have, as I've quoted, there's a reason why there are US sanctions against its leadership.
Yeah, the leadership of the RSF never said that there is no atrocities in the war, but they are looking for a fair, investigations in that. They are looking for a fair deal with that, for people with experts and from the UN bodies to come down on the ground in Sudan and to look for these atrocities, to listen to them. The RSF welcomed the fact-finding missions when it was announced.
Even in this moment, there are analysts who are saying that the RSF forces and their allies are besieging entire state capitals and starving innocent civilians.
This is totally wrong, because this siege, the people should go first to the beginning. Why was al-Fashir involved in the war? The Fashir was involved in the war because of the SAF. The Fashir was safe area. But actually, Al-Burhan and the SAF commander, he bring many of the peoples who were in the military movements to their sides and provide them with a lot of money to be involved in the war in Al-Fashir, like Jibril and Minni Minawi. This is the issues of Al-Fashir. Right now, the government, the de facto government of Port Sudan with Al-Burhan and Muslim Brotherhood are separating the countries. They are depriving the people in Darfur
and these groups are also splitting the country.
No, Yalda, just listen to me, that these people in Port Sudan, the de facto government, is depriving the people in Darfur and Kordofan from education, health services, renewing passports, civil rights, all of these things. When I came here to Niala and I went to Niala hospital, I found that the children are back. The diseases like the mumps, the rubella, the polio are back. Why? Because the federal government or the de facto government is preventing the vaccines from coming here to the children. TB is back, malnutrition is back, renal dialysis patients cannot find dialysis. All these services are funded by the federal government, and it is totally deprived from Darfur Kordofan people. So this is the real separation. The SAF regime is an apartheid regime. That's why you need to stand against that.
Dr. Nugud, thank you for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, the Lionesses are joined in their victory parade by thousands of England fans after their historic Euros win.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimate 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
They brought it home, and thousands of England fans joined the Lionesses in London today for a parade ending in front of Buckingham Palace, where they lifted the Euros trophy. Sarina Wiegman's side are now back-to-back European champions after their dramatic win over Spain on Sunday. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris was at the parade.
If they hadn't grasped the scale of their success, now surely they did. They'd really done it. Bringing the trophy home to stay home. New icons for the nation. And this is who the Lionesses did it for. The fans who inspired them through all the moments of agony and adversity at the Euros.
Champions again, ole, ole.
Defending the title even harder to win it than the first time. But they did. And everything is bigger this time. Only the mouth fitting for football royalty.
This homecoming really cements the legendary status of these Lionesses, and for the Queens of the comeback, it just had to be a party at the Palace.
The tension of the tournament released.
I've been crying all the way down the mouth. 2022 was a fairy tale, but this feels really hard-earned.
Whenever I'm broken.
Burna Boy bringing out a new side of Sarina Wiegman.
They didn't keep their promise to finish things quicker. They just showed up when it was really necessary and urgent.
Make some noise for the Lionesses!
Thanks again to a Chloe Kelly winner in the final.
Thank you to everyone that got out to support us, whether that's in Switzerland or here today. It's so special.
We are live, so I will apologise for that language right there.
Forgiven for anything.
The young player of the tournament, Michelle.
Would any of us even be here without the 19-year-old's dramatic late quarter-final and semi-final equalisers?
Doesn't even seem real seeing people down there. Like, it seems fake, but it's crazy to see what we've done and be here today.
So many times in Switzerland when they came close to early elimination, it was hard to ever imagine this. Never before have England footballers, men or women, had a day like this.
I want them to hear how proud we are of them all. They've made history. They've made history. They've brought it home again.
Players will never want this party to end.
I feel myself getting quite emotional, seeing how much joy we've brought to the nation, the amount of people that have come out, the adrenaline, the energy that was brought was insane.
Scenes once unimaginable when their manager, now a triple European champion, was starting out in football.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. You can't dream this because it was totally impossible in an earlier life, I would say. And then you're here and you're Buckingham Palace and you're on a bus open and everyone's waving and then you have that party. It's just I'll never, ever, ever forget this in my life.
Just like the Euros thrillers, this party went into extra time. And the Lionesses want momentum beyond the medals, not just inspiring future Lionesses, ensuring equal access to football, a lasting legacy to honour the greatest England football team ever. Rob Harris, Sky News, Buckingham Palace.
And that's it for me and the team on The World Tonight. We're back tomorrow at 9 p.m. Matt Barbet is coming up next with Sky News at 10 and the latest on Israel's anger after the Prime Minister's announcement on Palestinian statehood. Good night.